this is Kimberlea, and Yoga Snack is our bite-sized podcast where Robbie and I serve up nourishing discussions on yoga, astrology, nourishment, and mindset.
We mix wisdom with personal experiences to serve up quick, insightful conversations that nourish your practice and add flavor to your daily life.
Ready for a quick bite of wisdom? Let's dig in. Welcome to Yoga Snack. We are going to talk about the fourth yama, which is Brahmacharya. Do you know the translation for that, Robbie?
Brahmacharya, non-excess.
Non-excess, yeah. And sometimes too, it's more commonly known as celibacy, abstinence. And this concept, I want to kind of take everybody back really briefly. Like yoga was actually more like a monastic, in a traditional sense, way of life. You're choosing the spiritual path as the way of being in your whole life. And in the body, there's energy, right, in all forms, and sexual energy is one of them. And sexual energy is powerful. And this was also mostly, right, for men. And we were joking earlier, I was like, control yourself, fellas, calm down, contain some of that. And sexual energy, the ancient yogis would say that to that point of ejaculation, to pause that and to reabsorb that energy. So you're reabsorbing instead of emitting life force, you're actually reabsorbing it into the body, and it's heightening that energetic exchange in your own body. And so containing that instead of emitting it was sort of part of the point. But I think also it's about not getting distracted while you're on the path. And speaking as a woman, I feel like, in the society that we live in, a lot of times it's like, oh, boys will be boys. And, sort of that rhetoric that's actually unhelpful instead of really encouraging people to be in charge of their desires and impulses. And so I like to teach Brahmacharya because we're all householders. We're not living in a cave. We're not living in an ashram. We haven't, gone down that path. So the householder path has to include things like having children, which if we all understand how that happens, there's a process of intimacy, that goes along with it. And so Brahmacharya very much is more about moderation. It's about trying not to have things running you as far as substances, impulses, and ideas. And it doesn't mean that we're cutting ourselves off from the world. It's just we're in right relationship with those things. And sometimes we have to pull way back from stuff to kind of check ourselves. And Brahmacharya actually means walking with God, and I know that word doesn't always land with everybody, so you can replace that with whatever, but it's being in a state of awe with the world, like walking around and seeing things with like fresh eyes, and being in a state of kind of wonder and appreciation for all the things that are around us and within us. And it's exercising that moderation, because anything in excess, we all know, it begins to run our lives. And so with that, we have practices that help us come into a place of I don't like the word restraint, but deep observation about how we're managing our energy and what's running us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I think that since I've sort of started on this yogic path, getting caught up in being renunciate is something that I've noticed for myself, like wanting to sort of curb some of some of that excess, but doing it in a way that it's like, I don't want to do that at all now. And I don't know that that's actually like facing it. I think that's maybe running from it in a sense. Like you're not looking it straight in the eye and saying, okay, you're not controlling me. Instead, it's like, I'm just not going to engage with that thing. Or
Right. Yeah. So much easier to just be like hot or cold. Right.
Yeah. Right.
But I do think that there's value. Like we can even talk about this in dietary sense, like I think there's value in backing away from things that bog us down, that clog our system, and giving yourself time away from something in order to be able to reacquaint yourself with it and decide, does it fit or doesn't it anymore. So like if you have let's say you go on a cleanse, I'm not a, first of all, I want to be really clear, I'm not a proponent of like crazy cleanses and fasting. Some people have their things. I've never fasted beyond 24 hours before. But I'll go through when the seasons change, I'll take out, I don't drink alcohol. But when I did, I would take out alcohol, sugar, caffeine, gluten, and dairy. And it would be over the course of a couple weeks, and you slowly pull it out. And then, the last week of the cleanse is like slowly reintroduce it and see what relationship you have to it now. And it's like, oh my God, I there was one like with Colby Jack cheese. I'm like, I actually don't like this cheese even. Why am I eating it? Because I replaced a lot of stuff with like avocado to give it that creaminess. And then I added the cheese back and I was so excited. And I put it back. I was like, I actually don't like this. And it's interesting how numb we become when we're in that place of constant consumption. So I think there's some value in, backing way away from it and then looking at things again. And sometimes it's, if somebody's dealing with a form of addiction, it's real hard to just like re-enter, right, that relationship with it. There is sometimes a renunciation that has to happen. Years ago, I stepped away from alcohol. I had a teacher that I was listening to a lecture, and his name's Rod Stryker, and he was talking about yoga teachers coming to him saying that they were sort of struggling and trying to get on this path again, and and he's like, these are the same yoga teachers that are like going and having this event, right? People are paying money to go see them. They're teaching. And then after the event, they go and they get shit faced with their students. And he's like, first of all, this path that we're walking has a scaffolding for a reason. It's not for everybody. Mm-hmm. And he said, a lot of the things we have to do is we have to start examining things. And the mic drop moment when he was saying this about alcohol, he said, and drugs, he said, if it makes you feel good, maybe you don't feel good and you should look into that. And I was like, oh, snap. Oh, shit. And I never drank a lot, really, but that moment changed my perception of altering myself chemically, because I wanted to feel good. And the funny thing is like that's something when people are like, oh, you don't drink, or I'm like, no, I feel good. I want to keep feeling good. And that actually, if I look at it long term, or even day after, or even during it, I don't actually feel good. It's just this thing that I've taken on that isn't for me, right? And that's not for everybody. We all have to have our own relationship. I think that we have to get our own, straight with our own selves. But it's a matter of moderation. And I very much have an all or nothing personality, I find. And so it's really hard to always, pull back and re-engage. And it's like you said, sometimes it's easier to just be like, I'm good. And sometimes it's okay to do that, right? Like,
Sure.
is there value in that? Or is it just something we were doing because everybody else was doing it? Maybe we have social anxiety, maybe, like there's all sorts of stuff. But I think that's even with food, right? Because I'm still an emotional eater. And there's
Me too.
comfort in certain foods, and there's things that I crave, and you know, and being able to understand, like, is the food running me? Is the craving running my behavior and my decisions? And to get some clarity and to regain some moderation around things so that we're not having things outside of us run us because we stop enjoying them because we need them. Like if we needed chocolate cake every morning, do you really think you enjoy that chocolate cake in the way that you would if it was something that you experienced maybe once every couple few months and you're just like,
Yeah, I don't think that would be the case.
Mm,
I think heck, I just experienced it we just had Thanksgiving here.
mm,
So
mm.
I told you over the weekend we were looking at a pastry case and I'm like, I've eaten so many cookies and like I don't even want these don't even look good. And so I'm
Yeah.
like literally I've just went through that
Hmm.
where it's
And I think the more clarity that we get, because we want to choose to feel good, and it's like not about perfection or judgment or criticism, but it's tapping into and really tuning into, do I feel good? Because a lot of times we don't even know that that's a question that we deserve a real honest answer to. Because a
Mhm.
lot of times we just are so used to feeling like garbage, to feel like we're run down, to feel like we're over caffeinated or, strung out or numb, that's such a state of being that we don't question whether or not we feel good. So when that statement came around,
Hmm.
and that literally, like, there is a moment I can point to and say my life changed with that. And like I said, my previous relationship, he struggles with addiction, and that was a huge contrast. So I was never really imbibing because I had to be, the sober adult in the house, and I was in charge of a lot of things, including 4 children. And so I really didn't have that opportunity. But if I did, it's like, do I really actually want this? And those are great questions to ask as you move through your life. And what it does, um, it puts us more in that middle path, right? So we're not um, depriving ourselves from life, because the householder path has a lot of um, sensation involved with it, right? Like you typically have a job and you're in the world and you have relationships and you have families and maybe you have children, or you're in relationship with your parents and your coworkers, and so there's these relationships that we have to constantly negotiate, and it's to appreciate and to gain a sense of clarity and wonder in our lives so that we're still wide awake, receiving the world in a state of like, wow, this is amazing. Because what happens is we numb ourselves and we distract ourselves, or, we just stop realizing how beautiful and incredible the world is as it presents itself, because we're kind of also we get in that loop of like needing everything to be different than it is.
Hmm.
Just one more greens packet and then I'm going to finally be healthy, or something like that, like it goes like that too, I think. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, and it's complex, but it goes into all areas and activities in our life. It's not just food. But it's the amount. Think about work, right?
Hmm.
Are you spending too much energy on something and neglecting other things in your life, you know. So that's also really important to look at. So I think it has to do, you know, even sexuality, like, you know, are you obsessing about sex all the time, or do you just are you doing it all the time with lots and lots and lots of people? Fine. And that's okay. For my experience, right? That would be too much of an energy output for me, and it would be too excessive for me personally. And we all have to come into our own right relationship, because even in that renunciate path, that very traditional path, it was very masculine. And there is a lot of energy and power inside of sexual energy. I mean, my goodness, it takes these two tiny cells and creates a human being. There is energy inside of that. And so it's not to shame people, it's not to tell people, you know, not to enjoy themselves. In fact, I think that that's really what it's an invitation to, is to enjoy it without it running you, right?
Yeah. So going back to that, the like energy consumption, in traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about Jing energy, right? And the way I understand it is that we have a certain amount of that when we're born, and it slowly dissipates as we age. But I also have read that sexual thoughts deplete your Jing energy. Have you heard anything about that? Or
Well, let me frame that really quick. Let's talk about Jing for just a sec. I'm not an expert, but I've studied some Chinese medicine. I like to break this up into two parts. It's like prenatal qi. We can think about before you're born, prenatal qi, in Chinese medicine, qi is energy, or Jing. And then we have postnatal qi. Prenatal chi is like this wild card energy. You know, like in Uno, your wild card can be a blue, it can be a six, it can be, you know, like it could be anything you want it to be. And that energy is very precious, but it's limited. And I always think of it as like the pantry. And when you're cooking, right, hopefully your kitchen is well stocked and you can kind of grab things from the cupboard, and you can have enough in your near reach that you're able to grab what you need. But if there's nothing in the cupboard, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the pantry, take something out. But this pantry can't be restocked. When that pantry is empty, you're empty, and essentially you die, right? Like that's kind of the point. But your kitchen pantry can be restocked. So we would think of it as like, you know, what can you influence in your life to bring energy back into the kitchen, right? So how could I restock? Well, I'll go to the grocery store and I'll have great friendships, and I'll breathe clean air, and I'll eat food, and I'll move my body regularly, and I'll, you know, and those are things where we're restocking kitchen. So we hopefully don't get to a place where we're constantly pulling from the pantry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So anytime there are just things that happen, aging, we end up pulling from the pantry. And so for women, anytime they have a menstrual cycle, they're taking from the pantry. They take a small thing from the pantry. And it's just a process of being alive, because otherwise we'd live forever. So every month that a woman menstruates, pulling something from that pantry. When a man ejaculates with sex, something comes from the pantry. Now, I don't know about sexual thoughts. I don't know if that's part of it, because our thoughts have energy, you know. But I would say that also, that concept in Chinese medicine speaks to moderation, right? And as a man, right, if you are constantly in a place where you are, you know, moving energy out of you, and you're pulling from that pantry, and that pantry is getting depleted by things that maybe you could moderate, right? Because here's the other thing: enjoyment and pleasure and relationship and connection fills the kitchen. Right? So then you're not pulling. So even though you're going to have to pull from the pantry, your kitchen is still stocked.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, right,
That's how
right,
I
right.
like to kind of be saying. But as far as thoughts go, I'm not really sure about that one, but it's a great question. I think anything that is overwhelming us and consuming us, right? That word consuming is a great thing to just inquire and look into. And it's tricky because I think in our culture there's this repression around sexuality, and there's this over sexualization that we live in, and it's so hard to like reconcile it, you know.
Yeah.
You go to other countries and it's just so interesting, you know, that even like bodies are seen differently, and you know, and the things that we act like we're not doing over here, but we actually are doing, you know. Like, it's just such a funny, weird place to kind of wobble around and figure things out for ourselves. So I think that having a healthy sex life is important. You know, I think that that's part of enjoyment, and it's a part of being alive, and it's a matter for you as a human, because we're all very different, to figure out what that means for you. And for each of us, that's going to be a little bit different. I don't you if you're watching this, you'll see we changed our title underneath, because we talked about our Chinese medicine elements the year that we were born and stuff. And so I'm a wooden tiger,
Mm-hmm.
and
I'm a fire rabbit.
fire rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we come into this world with these different ways of being in the world. You know, we've talked about astrology too. Like, we're all made up just a little bit different. So my needs are going to be different than your needs, and they're different than, you know, listeners' needs. And so this path of yoga is about studying yourself and creating a framework from all of these um, ancient scientists, will say, and artists. Yoga is a science and an art of being able to know yourself and to contain yourself in the right quantity, that you are the most powerful, effective version of yourself. And that's going to change over time. So you have to keep paying attention because what worked at one point isn't going to always work at another point in your life.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really what a path is doing, is it's allowing you to walk on the work of the people that have gone before you and have proven things to be not certainty, but to have, you know, some credential and clarity around how to show up in the world. So yeah.
It's like you know, we're not to non-possessiveness, but it's almost like trying to not become that like character.
Oh,
Like,
Gollum
yeah,
from
Lord
Lord of
of
the
the Rings. Yeah.
Rings.
It's like Gollum is all about
Right.
like possessing the thing. But you know, this
And
probably ties in a little bit.
And it's making him suffer.
Right. Yeah.
Right. When we don't even know that we're suffering, and we're welcoming suffering into our lives because that thing is actually running us. No, I think that's a perfect analogy. You know, they all sort of bleed over into each other. Like when you start to really look, because now we're like, oh, ahimsa, oh, that's hard. So let's try that, you know, and like we keep kind of coming into this next layer and stuff. But that's
Yeah, I think we can become a Gollum with just about anything. Like, it's not just the one ring to rule them all. It's you could be a Gollum with cookies or
right, my precious,
right, TV programs, or you know, these are all things that, like, if you sit on the couch for too long and watch TV, eventually you're going to not be doing so well.
Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. And there's just different phases of our life, and if we're not curious and we're not interested, then I think that's where things get really challenging, and we don't understand the amount that we are actually contributing to our own suffering.
Yeah.
Damn it. There was, when I was visiting my daughter in college, there was a hat and it said, Houston, I am the problem. I was like, I should have bought it, because it's like a lot of times, like we are creating our own suffering.
Yeah.
And, I think I've said this before, like yoga is a confrontation with ourselves. It's not about checking out and be like, peace and love, man. Like, I'm going to yoga and I'm going to be a better person. You're like going to yoga and you're like, oh my God, I'm fucked up. And holy shit, what I do on my mat, I do in my life.
Yeah.
And that's just things we should start to pay attention to. And here's the other thing. Let's go way back. Harming, non-harming, kindness, truthfulness. Like this is all being done with a sense of loving kindness. This isn't to go in and like start to beat yourself up and to judge and to criticize and to lean into perfectionism, right? It's about really understanding that you and this human experience is such a limited, precious gift that if you are interested in sort of, I don't know if optimize is the right word, but containing your energy and moving from this really powerful, integrated whole space into your life, that's really what the path of yoga is an invitation to.
Yeah.
But it's harder than we probably realize. And so it has to be endeavored, I think, slowly, but also with compassion and kindness. Because otherwise we become a judgy asshole. There's a lot of cuss words in this one. Better make sure we put the explicit,
Right. 18 and over.
explicit content involved. Do you know when we were doing teacher training? I don't think I had Brahmacharya when we had ours, but I had to present, and I may have already mentioned this on another podcast, but I brought in dark chocolate covered cherries. And I told everyone that they couldn't eat it. They had just one. And what I did is I took them through this mindful eating exercise, which is excruciating when you have something that you just want to throw a handful in your mouth. You've got one giant dark chocolate covered cherry. And I had them first by looking at it, and then I'd have them smell it, and then I'd have them feel the texture of it. I'd have them put it right on the lips. And then I'd have them, set it on their tongue. And this all at a minute at a time. Each of these things is 1 minute at a time. And your mouth is like going crazy at this point. And then, and then it's like, put it between your teeth, but don't bite it.
Oh.
And then only take one, like gently press down, hold your teeth together with it between your, and it was gosh. Like, and I mean, by the time I had this one student and he's like, I've got to admit, Kim, I chewed it up. And I was like, that's okay. But I'll tell you, when you like to be in that experience of that chocolate covered cherry and you finally are like in that, you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. Look at all the things lighting up in my mouth. Like, life can be experienced like that, right? If we're not numbing ourselves and over consuming all the time, that's available to us. And I think that's really what the invitation of Brahmacharya is. It's like, slow down, savor. And I still I don't do that on purpose, that practice, but I probably should. But that's with everything, whether it's intimacy or it's our food or even our media, our relationships. Sometimes we get close to people and we stop valuing their contributions, to our lives and stuff like that. And so it's like, slow down, take it one tiny moment at a time and look at all of the things you might be missing, because when we hurry through it, a lot of times we're contributing to our suffering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yoga is just like asking you to become the most potent version of yourself. And if you're diluting that with external satisfaction at every turn, you're probably not, that experience isn't going to be as potent as it could be. Your senses aren't going to be as potent as they could be.
Right. So. I was saying too, like way back in the day, I used to drink beer, and I was like, I stopped drinking beer when I stopped smoking, because I was like, ew, this is gross, because my senses were deadened, right? Because of the nicotine and the smoke and the tar and and all of that stuff. And so my taste was changed even. And I wasn't really realizing what I did and didn't enjoy. And that's maybe another interesting little, quip for us to just look at. And again, it's not to get overdone, because I think, if we get too dogmatic about it and we get too regimented about something, even moderation then can become that it's not moderation anymore. It's extreme behavior. And so it's looking at it really closely and carefully over time, because you're going to change as things change too. And so am I. But seeing where that practice, right? This is all practice. This isn't like you're going to get it right, Brahmacharya, it's a practice. It's like, oh, this part of yoga, this 8-limbed path, this is part of it, is looking at the practice of moderation. So maybe that's a good place to leave off.
Yeah.
Okay. What do we think? So contemplate that. Where in your life this week, listeners, could you look a little closer and gain some perspective on where you're losing enjoyment, and how to regain that potentially just by maybe backing out of things a little bit more and looking. That could be a media cleanse, social media cleanse, right? It could just be, eliminating some stimulants from your diet if those are things that you consume regularly, or, anything. So yeah, especially after the holidays. And it's not bad to indulge, right? It's not bad or wrong to indulge. It's just, if you're doing it all the time, it's not indulgence, it's a lifestyle. Right. And same thing with, sexual activity, apps and all sorts of stuff that we can get. It really consumes us. Can you be a more conscious consumer in ways? I'd love for you guys to contemplate that this week. And as always, we love to hear your feedback. We want to know what you think, what you want to learn more about. We've had a really good time having these conversations and sharing them with you. And we'll continue to do so at least until the end of the year. So, all right. Oh, we're going to have a cooking. We're going to talk about food before the holidays. So stay tuned. We're going to probably take a break on the yamas and niyamas. We'll do one more yama. And then we're going to talk about food, you guys. Yeah, we're going to dedicate it to enjoyment and, really nourishing ourselves in a way that feels good. So stay tuned and see you next time.